Hello, you're here with Kevin and Brandon on Times with Kevin and Brandon. And today I'm going to be discussing the opioid epidemic as well as opioid addiction. Now, when did it start? That's a question that many people ask. And it's always been an epidemic, even back in the 50s and 60s when people weren't, made aware of the topic or anything like that. But it really started, the trajectory, in my opinion, really started in the 80s when doctors started to overprescribe medications such as Percocet, Vicodin, and such, as well as the early 90s with the emergence of heroin chic and when heroin became fashionable by snorting and smoking. Now, over time, it progressed and it got worse and worse. And a lot of people for many years just swept it under the rug, but it has always been an epidemic, and now it has reached such an extraordinary proportion of devastation. And, there's been a lot of blame casted at many parties for this. A lot of pharmaceutical companies having to settle out of court with lawsuits and such. And, I believe that it was always an epidemic even back in the 60s, and it only just got worse and worse until we could no longer ignore it. Now, I have an experience with drug addiction myself. I was addicted to heroin for many years, and thankfully I overcame it. And it really was one of the hardest things I've ever had to overcome. And I started out with prescription drugs myself, prescription painkillers. And I didn't think anything of it at the time when I started, but over time it just got progressively worse. And that's kind of like what the epidemic has been, sort of like an addiction in a way, where it's only gotten worse and worse until we can no longer ignore it. Now, there are ways that people can stop by using Suboxone, Sublocade, methadone, and even going to AA or some sort of self-help group. And a lot of people, and not just the addicts are the ones who suffered through this, but also their loved ones and such. And it has left a profound impact on so many families, and there are so many families who've been destroyed. And my family was nearly destroyed by it because of what I was going through. And what I would recommend for anybody who is suffering from opioid addiction is to seek help, get counseling, get therapy, and try to go to the root of the problem. Because for many years I ignored it and I tried to white knuckle it and I couldn't. And I sympathize heavily with people who suffer from drug addiction, because I know it is a very unpleasant thing, and I know that a lot of people around you hurt because of it as well, because of what you're doing to yourself, and you become a source of pain for a lot of people. And that's what I was for much of my family for many years. And I really feel for them, and I still have some guilt harbored from what I did before. And I've been doing what I can to make it right, and I've been clean for over 2 years now, and it's been a different experience. And I had periods of clean time before, but I wasn't ready to get clean and get right. But now I think in a way I kind of grew out of it, and not only that, I just had it because I couldn't go on like that anymore. But sadly, there's a lot of people who still are going like that. And the availability is just outrageous, and it's really sad. And I just wish that there were more places that people could go to get help, because a lot of places, a lot of countries are underfunded and ill-equipped to deal with the social consequences of addiction. And we need to address this thing in the proper way, because a lot of people, really, they're not violent or anything, they just suffer from a horrible drug addiction. And I even wrote a book called Coming from a Tainted Beauty, which takes place in the early 90s, actually early to mid-90s, and it's based off of the heroin chic because, in my opinion, uh, that was when the opioid epidemic really became and to go into full throttle, when heroin became more fashionable, and that was at the same time when doctors began overprescribing meds and such. And you could get that book on Amazon Kindle, and I believe that it's still on Kindle Unlimited, and you should check it out. I mean, it really shows the progression of addiction and how people try to sugarcoat it and such and say they're not as bad as that person, but that's always yet to come. And for me, I've been in AA before, and I will say it did help a bit and such, but I had to find my own way to get right, and that's what a lot of people struggle with, is finding their own way to get right with things, because it's a really opioids are very, very addictive, and it's a really hard thing to overcome, especially with the physical aspect of it, because the withdrawals are absolutely horrendous. And I will say it is very dangerous because it slows your breathing, and if you stop breathing, that will lead to cardiac arrest and death, potentially. And for many years my family worried about me and what I would do, and if I was still going to be here or not. And this has had a huge impact on society as well, because everyone nowadays has Narcan, in somewhere. Anywhere you go in the United States, there will probably be somewhere in your vicinity, there will probably be some Narcan, just in case someone ODs on fentanyl or something. And did society ignore this until they could no longer? My opinion, yes and no, because there were some people who brought the issue to the public eye, but I will say many people didn't take it seriously until all these deaths started to occur. And I will say it is a massive issue, and could have it been prevented? Perhaps, but nevertheless, we're here now, and we need to find a way to deal with it. And my way simply was to have, be on the right medication, because I had trauma from my life before, and I dealt with depression issues and such, and that was what has helped me a bit. And also having a sense of purpose is a huge thing that will help with someone who struggles with drug addiction, is giving them a sense of purpose. Because like in countries such as Portugal, gave their addicts a new life when they got released from prison or rehab or whatever, and it has gotten a lot better in that country from what I have seen. And that is probably the main thing that can put an end to this, or one of the main things, is to give addicts a sense of purpose. Get them a job, get them a trade. And some countries have seemed to have a better handle on this sort of issue than others. And I will say that having a sense of purpose is a big deal for me, because if you don't feel like you have any purpose and such, you will just not care. You'll be more apt and more vulnerable to just not caring at all, and that will lead you to use. That will lead a lot of addicts to relapse. And what will the future of this be? I have no idea. I wish that people would seek out somebody who is sober, or someone who could help them, because it is a pain that goes beyond what anyone could imagine, especially being sick and having to do something to stay well, which is just really unpleasant. And it's a miserable experience. And maybe perhaps educating people on what will happen if you do these things, and how you will live in denial over it, because that is what goes hand in hand with addiction, is denial. you won't think that you're as bad as you are, or you will try to sweep it under the rug or sugarcoat or whatever, and it just will yield very unsatisfactory and devastating results in the end. And for me, I thought I was invincible until it took the rug out from beneath my feet and I fell on my face. And I've seen so many other people who've struggled, and a lot of people I know are no longer here as a result of that. And it seems to be an ongoing epidemic, especially with all the people you see ODing every day, and it's really sad in my opinion. And maybe perhaps they will start some more programs for people to get into and show people that there is a way out and such. But also too, I have recognized that a lot of people nowadays, from seeing what has happened, they've become adverse to drug use in general, which is a good thing, because they won't be as likely to fall into the loop of living like that. And for me, I wish that I would have known some things that I know now. And they say life is a lesson, you learn it when you're through, and you just keep learning. And that is the very truth. And for me, when I was using, I really didn't care about anything. And like I said, and I'll reiterate, I think having a sense of purpose is what really has helped me the most out of everything that I've gone through, as well as not feeling like a social pariah, because when I was using, I felt like a social pariah, and a lot of people in the world look down on addicts and such. And even though it's become, I wouldn't say become more acceptable, but people don't cast out people like that as much as they used to, but it's still there. And I wish that people would be more understanding, more empathetic. And what will the future be? I don't know. It's been an ongoing epidemic, and it's actually, in my opinion, it started in the 50s or 60s, and it's only progressively got worse. And now we're probably at the peak of it, with people overdosing and such. And I think, in my opinion, we should have more programs that are available to these people, and more programs that will get them back in the workforce, that will give them a sense of purpose, because I think that will help a lot. Because Portugal, from what I've researched, they've given people jobs and such, and given them a sense of purpose. And I think that, has helped a great deal of addicts get right, because having a sense of purpose will always keep your hope alive, and that's what people live off of, is hope. And a lot of addicts have lost all hope and such, but in my opinion, there's always hope. And I had a sense of hope myself when I was an addict. Even though it was a very minuscule sense, it was still a sense of hope nonetheless. And what I'll conclude with is that, we need to keep addressing this issue and letting people know that there's help out there. And if they seek it, they will get it. And perhaps maybe even in the future, we could provide more programs for people to get back in the workforce and to get back integrated into society. And I'll leave it with that. And you are here with Kevin and Brandon on Times with Kevin and Brandon. And this